So I picked my girlfriend's mom to be Secret Santa for this year, and I decided I'd make her a coffee table out of some reclaimed cypress that I got from a local museum. I believe it had held a sculpture at one point, but had now been decommissioned, and these boards were just getting thrown away. They're actually quite nice. They're about B-grade cypress, but they've got great figure, and they're 2.5-inch boards. So once I threw them through the planer a couple of times, they had really beautiful surface finish, which gave me a nice starting point before I started eventually sanding. The surface had been sort of cruddy from sitting around in the basement of the museum for so long, and once I planed it through, it really took a nice look. Here I'm planing down another piece of cypress. This piece is just going to be used as the cross bracing to make the tabletop out of the longer section. It's just going to be 3 boards laid side by side with a gap in between each one, sort of barn door style. These are the shavings that the planer made. It did much better work than I could have done with a sander in the amount of time. From there, I took the boards over to my new woodworking shop. I haven't had many opportunities to use this shop just for hobby projects, so I was excited to sort of break it in with just a fun project. I pretty quickly realized that I wasn't going to be able to use the shop much except for making cuts and maybe assembly, because I was going to do the finish work mostly at home for convenience. So here I just used the track saw to cut off the ends, then actually used it to make my cross cuts because my compound miter saw isn't big enough. I thought I was going to have to do 2 passes with the track saw, one on each side, but I decided I'd just go with the Japanese saw to finish off the cut that the track saw couldn't finish. Japanese saw is really great because it cuts on the pull stroke, which gives you a lot more control and a fair amount of force. Whereas with American saws, you cut on the push stroke, which makes it challenging to have the same amount of control. I think I cut each board to 43 inches, and I used the first board as the template for the second 2. Just square them up, mark them with a knife, and cut them with the crosscut. Finish them with the Japanese saw. Once they're all cut and ready, I can lay them out and get an idea of what the surface of the coffee table might look like. And then after that, I can cut the cross bracing, which I just put a quick 45 on the edge, quick miter, to give it a little bit more of a finished look. Once they're laid out and I'm pretty confident which sides are going to be facing out, I can start sanding the outside edges and the inside edges. I didn't run these through the planer, which maybe I could have, but I didn't want to run them up on edge. So I had to start them around 80 grit to knock off the crud and then work my way up to 220 grit sandpaper. Once they were sanded up, I just went ahead and put a first coat of spar varnish on the edges that would end up being the inside edges, because they would be really difficult to get any kind of finish on once the tabletop was assembled. So with a coat of spar varnish, I could let these dry and set up and then assemble the tabletop later, move the table back home and do the finish work there. I also put a coat of spar varnish on the back side of the cross bracing and the underside of the table's top, basically where the surfaces are going to meet, and once they're put together, they'd no longer be accessible to put some finish. Now I'm just checking to make sure that I have the grain and the boards laid out the way I want them. And I'm going to assemble the tabletop now that the spar varnish, the first coat, has dried up. I just use the blade of the square to space out the spacing in between each top board. That way they're nice and even. It's about an 1/8 inch spacing. Assembly went really easy. Now that the top is put together, I can sand it a bit more and I'll attach the legs to the bottom. I bought these hairpins online. They're pretty inexpensive for how nice they are, and they're extremely easy to attach. Now the table is more or less assembled, I can take it home to the backyard shop where I can more easily put coats of spar varnish on in the future. I think I ended up putting 3 coats of spar varnish on this table, all in all. In between coatings, I hit it with a little 220 sandpaper to knock down the bumps and ensure that there's good adhesion between coats. Now you can get an idea of what the surface finish looks like. This is a clear gloss spar varnish. I think it does a good job at really highlighting the grain and figure of this particular cypress. And it'll last for quite a long time, and this whole table could be used outdoors if you didn't want to be inside at any point. And here it is in its final resting place. I think it turned out pretty good.